a good technical stuff, okay?
We got a message that this meeting has been investigated.
What?
Really?
Yeah, I got a screen. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll figure it out later. Let's continue.
Oh, we aren't discussing anything that's, anyways.
Yeah.
It's all right. It's all right.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we should wait 5 minutes more, please, because people are joining.
Mahesh, it's all right. It is going to be live streaming, so it is already started. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, sorry for the interruption. I think there was some technical problem. Yeah, welcome back. And I hand it over to Anu to continue her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Markesh, and thank you everyone for the patience. So I will pick it up from where I left. So I was talking about the most important labor task associated with cardamom production, which is cardamom picking, which happens every 45 days on a cardamom plantations. And this is a job which requires a lot of patience, diligence, and nimble fingers. Therefore, it has, since the colonial times, made a work of women. It's a gendered discourse of work. And of course, my interlocutors were in the plantations where I was working were mainly from the scheduled caste communities of Tamil Nadu, such as Parayas, Pallars, and also Velalas sometimes, because they are the backward caste. So one of the, okay, I have a problem and okay, here I find a problem and share. Okay, wait, can you see it again? Yeah, cool. I think there have some technical glitches. Okay, anyway, despite of that, so these women workers are fourth or third generation descendants of cardamom plantation laborers who were recruited using Kangani system in the 1800s. And for a tedious, very strenuous, back-breaking, nerve-wracking task, for 8 to 10 hours a day, they receive up to 320 Indian rupees in 2019 as their wage rate. And most of these women have no asset holdings. They live on layams. So you see to the right of the screen, that is a labor quarters in a plantation. And they live there. Of course, these living spaces are owned by the plantation owner. This is a small house which has 2 compartments. And to ensure this living space, what these women have to do is to contribute another member every time from their families into the labor force. Why? Because with the retirement of them from their labor force, they otherwise will have to move out of these living spaces, which ensures that generation after generation, there is someone who is going into the same labor. Therefore, cardamom picking in the Cardamom Hills in all major estates is an intergenerational labor, which is a gender discourse of work performed by mostly Dalit or scheduled caste women or other backward caste women who work in a under a Brahminical hierarchy. Why? Because the plantation owner is a dominant caste man. Under the plantation owner, you have a superintendent, that is again a dominant caste man, and again supervisors, dominant caste men, and under them the laboring tasks are issued to these women workers. So they work by the code of work in a plantation, which is to produce cardamom on an industrial level in a capitalistic system, but the codes of conduct are determined by the Brahminical patriarchy, exercised through male owners, male superintendents, male supervisors. So this is how cardamom gets produced. Now, the cardamom capsules, the so produced, are then dried at appropriate temperatures in cardamom curing houses, and then it goes to the auctioning or subsequent selling. So this is the next phase in the life of cardamom, where it is auctioned and sold. Cardamom auctioning is controlled by the Spices Board of India. It is an institutional body under the Ministry of Commerce. And at present, there are 2 auction centers in India, which one is located in Kerala, another one in Bodinaikanur in Tamil Nadu. And there are 2 kinds of actors in an auction center. Number one is the cardamom auction companies, and number 2 is the cardamom dealers who come to buy cardamom in the auctioning. Auction companies are those companies which facilitate auction. Now, it's very clear from this picture, if you look, who are the cardamom auctioners. It's dominant caste men. It's a male-only domain. In my 6 months of work there, I could not find even one single woman who is in that cardamom floor, auctioning for, except for myself. And what is also important is that how these men are there through generations. They have a very strong caucus of social networks by which most of them are there. Some of my interlocutors who are cardamom auctioners are there from the time, they are like it's an intergenerational business for them. And at this stage of cardamom auctioning and trading, they control the flow of money and capital. Now, I just wanted to quickly go back to show you the contrast in the workspaces. Now, look at these women workers. They are working in a forest-like atmosphere, producing cardamom, doing the hard manual labor. They get paid 320 Indian rupees for picking up to 25 or 30 kilograms of cardamom in one single day. And they are also working in a space like Cardamom Hills, where you have leeches in the plantation, even snakes like cobras. So even during the laboring time, their physical bodies are also a threat. Whereas this is a very comfortable space. I'm not saying that the labor of, auctioning and, conducting risk and calculating and evaluating, it's not lesser, but you see the contrast. But here, according to the recent rates, that is the rates from yesterday's auctioning, the price for 1 kilogram of cardamom was 2,144 rupees. Now you see that is the range of gap that I'm talking about in this industry, which is ruled by Brahminical patriarchy. So the cardamom capsules, which are so auctioned by the cardamom dealers, are brought to the cardamom processing units, wherein 3 steps are taken. So first one is sorting of cardamom capsules, second is grading, and the third one is packing. And mostly the cardamom processing units, or Elaka Kadai, that's what they call it in Tamil, are located in a small town in Bodinaikanur. It is located at the foothills of Bodinmettu ranges. So this is what a processing of cardamom looks like. The first to my left is a figure you see. The women workers are spreading cardamom over that wooden panel, which is called the sorting panel. It has punch holes, which has different diameters ranging from 6 millimeters to 9 millimeters. Now, when these women workers spread the cardamom capsules over the sorting panel, these cardamom capsules falls through according to their diameters, and they are separately collected. Now, the second one here, where you see the women workers sitting down, that's the grading floor. This is a place where these workers manually separate every single cardamom capsule into 3 grades. I wish to bring your attention to the fact that cardamom is one such spice which is priced on the international market depending on its grades, meaning higher the grade, higher the price. Therefore, it is these women workers who sit down there for 8 to 10 hours and do the strenuous and most laborious task of physically, deciphering each cardamom capsule into 3 grades. So at present, there are 3 different grades in the Indian cardamom industry. The number 1 is Alleppey Green Extra Bold, which is something between 8 mm diameter, and something under 8 mm diameter comes into the next grade, which is called Alleppey Green Bold. And the grade below that is Alleppey Green Superior. So these women workers, they sort of physically separate these cardamom capsules. And the third step in terms of cardamom processing is packing. Packing according to the certain grades, and of course packing in the bags of the exporting houses. Now, what is compelling again here at this stage of this commodity is that it's all women's work. Why? Because again, it's a work which requires, according to the owners as well as the managers of the processing units, that requires patience, diligence, and nimble fingers. These women workers again grade up to 25 or 20 kilograms of cardamom every day, for which they are only paid about 150 to 220 rupees in 2019 when I was doing my field work. This is because these women workers are hired temporarily. There are no formal wage contracts. Often they are hired using social networks. All the contracts are oral. They are not in any labor unions. They don't come under the purview of any labor welfare measures. And they only get such a minimal payment for a cardamom, which is like, in a couple of months back, top one grade was getting up to 100 euros a kilogram, whereas these women workers are getting paid something around max maybe 250 rupees now. So that's again the margin that I'm talking about here. Then again, here as well, the processing units are owned by upper caste, dominant upper caste men. They are controlled by managers, again, dominant upper caste. And who are these women workers? They are again the same group of women workers, either scheduled caste or the other backward classes, who are coming from the in and around regions of Bodinai Kannur, because they do not have other means of livelihood or asset holding. So they are working in a nexus of caste, class, and gender relations of the Indian society. In some sense, they are the invisible women. These workers who are engaged in the processing of cardamom are the invisible women behind one of the most lucrative commodity chain. Yes, cardamom chain is one of the most lucrative commodity chain, and these women workers are the invisible women, and they are even paid way lesser than the plantation workers. Now, this is again a place where the convergence of Brahmanism and capitalism is so obvious in this cardamom in this chain. Now the second and now the last phase: who controls the cardamom trade? As you see here on the screen, these are the top exporting brands of Indian small cardamom. While some of these names might be deceptive because they have a Persian or Arabic name, but they are all owned by dominant upper caste men who are of, from Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and also are for some brands, it is owned by Gujarati merchants who are of Baniya caste. Here again, you see that these people are into the same business for generations. One of my interlocutors who owns a top brand of cardamom is a Gujarati Baniya merchant who is into this business since the time of his great-grandfather. And these groups have their networks in the cardamom production sites, that is in the plantations, to the auction halls, to the processing units, to the port cities from where this spice gets exported, and even to the commodity markets in New York, in London, in Hamburg, in Dubai, of course. So there is this whole caucus of dominant caste men who actually controls cardamom trade in India. And this is also a reason. So while I was talking to some of my interlocutors who are the newcomers to this industry, they told me that it is simply impossible to get into these networks because the others would make sure that you are kicked out at various stages. So it's a wide network here I am talking about, even then again, where it is so visible how Brahmanism and capitalism works so closely in a commodity chain. Before I conclude my talk, I wish to shed your light on another aspect, which is even alarming how Brahmanism and capitalism works together. That is with the case of pesticide toxicity. Now, cardamom is a spice which is getting increasingly rejected by Western countries. Why? Because it has high pesticide residue. Now, why would a spice like cardamom, which Mahesh and others find it very novel, suddenly be a villain? It is because cardamom is this spice which also gets priced in the international market according to its looks. Meaning, if a high-grade cardamom with something like a diameter of 9 millimeter, if it happens to have a lesion or a mark of insect or pest infestation, it will be immediately rejected. Now, therefore, it is of great interest for the cardamom farmers or planters to make sure that their cardamom capsule are not pest infested. Now, how do they do that? Just simply by bringing chemical pesticides to, keep away the various pests such as stem borers or thrips or shoot borers or the capsule borers. So cardamom plantation these days are also a space where one could see hazardous chemical pesticides like organochlorines, organophosphates, or neonicotinoids are used. And these are the chemicals which are regarded as highly hazardous, highly toxic by World Health Organization. And they are carcinogens, neurotoxins, and they can cause severe disorders to reproductive systems and even genetic mutations. But they are used unchecked on the cardamom plantations. Why? Who gets the toxic burden? It's again these cardamom plantation workers. Now, it doesn't need my interpretation. You can just see the fingers of this woman worker here. Let me call her Mallika. Mallika is a third generation laborer in the estate where I have done my field work. Look at her hands. These fingers which pluck the cardamom berries or cardamom capsules, which is toxic. She is the one who is working there for 8 hours a day, inhaling and this toxic air. Her body often is burdened with various ailments such as headaches, nausea, skin irritations, rashes, lesions, blisters on hands. But all of this are very well hidden or brushed under the carpet because of the cardamom industry. Why? Because these women workers are obliged to endure the pesticide toxicity. Why? Because they work under strict rules of Brahminical patriarchy in these plantations, which control not only their work, but also their bodies which produces cardamom, bodies which process cardamom, which is grown in an atmosphere of highly toxic in nature. Therefore, coming to an end of the talk, I would say that cardamom is one such spice where in each stages, one could see how capitalism and Brahmanism operates together. Behind every single cardamom capsule that goes into your tea, coffee, biryani, or whatever it is, there are untold stories of hundreds of women plantation workers, like processing unit workers, whose labor, whose bodies are controlled for the production and circulation of this one particular commodity, which is produced exactly at the convergence of Brahmanism and capitalism, which Baba Saheb cautioned us in 1938. Therefore, it still continues. Each cardamom capsule, therefore, is a metaphor of how capitalism and Brahmanism operates together to breed inequalities in these plantation settings and reap benefits through super exploitation of Bahujan women in particular. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anu. Really, I mean, I don't have words to express, I mean, the kind of enlightenment on the so-called Kerala model, right? It's like often, we don't get these stories, how, the Bahujan women especially, they get oppressed economically, socially, and I mean, like in all different ways, right? It's like, so thank you so much. I mean, I know it's a very your presentation, the findings of your presentation are a work of like hard work of maybe like 6 years, right? So so it's really inspiring, and I congratulate you and your team. So now let's get to questions, like questions or comments. I open the floor for questions and comments. I request you to be very brief in your question or comment. Yeah, thank you. So let's first go to Brother Narayana Chidarla.
Hi, this is Narayana. So very great research on majorly women who are suffering from the not decades, from centuries. So thank you for that. So my major question is see, most of the laborers are coming from the scheduled caste or scheduled tribes. But when their grading system is going on, when they are grading the cardamom, in that also are they including all lower caste people or not? Or only segregating them for the labor work? So maybe I missed that point. If not, could you please elaborate on that?
Should I go with the answers, or you will be
Yes,
collecting them?
please. Yes,
Yeah,
please.
yes, please go with the answers. Yeah.
Narayana, thank you very much for that question. I mean, if I get it correctly, your question, of course, in the grading floors, these women are majorly coming from, scheduled caste or other backward classes. There's no, I mean, because in these, this is like a small town in the Body Metu ranges, it's called Bodinai Kennur, and most of these women are landless agricultural laborers who go to cardamom, processing units or elaka kadai during the season. So it's they are seasonal workers,
Yeah.
and So one part that I didn't mention in today's presentation is also that not just the caste is a very visible factor there, that who goes and what group of women goes to work there in this elaka kadais. And one reason is, of course, lack of alternative means to livelihood, because an agrarian distress in this region is one push factor for these women. And your question was on who are these women, right?
Yeah, when you see that the grading system, you showed the major laborers who are working in the field of on the hills. The other people they are working in the share under the grading all the cardamom, different grades and all. They are wearing very nice dresses, very but no, when it comes to the major laborers, they are having all these kind of getting all the sickness due to hard work. My major question is in that grading system also, in the who are sitting and doing very good job. They are also taking the scheduled caste people or scheduled tribe people, or only they are recruiting Brahminical or any upper caste people.
Maybe there are one or two women from the dominant caste of Tevar or Maravar in the region, but most of them are, of course, Dalits or other backward communities. And about the dress, that's an interesting point. I mean, so this is also because most of the Elaka Kadai, they what we call what in anthropology we call as they function within the image of family, because they are not like a factory setting or anything. They are often in the backyards of a big cardamom trader. They have this warehouse which is like you have to go through the house or the yard of the cardamom dealer. So it is well situated inside the property of a cardamom trader, and this is a work the physical setting, of course, it's very laborious and strenuous, but I don't think, and sometimes there are also cardamom grading floors operating on the top of the roofs of certain houses, because it's mostly like a seasonal work for these women. But of course, these days a lot of hoarding also happens in the cardamom industry, what they call as repooling, where you purchase certain amount of cardamom and then you keep it, and then you bring back to the cardamom circle again. So because of this, even though back in the days it was more seasonal, these days there are also processing units which work throughout the year. And the dress, I think it's just because in the plantation it's highly, it's like a forest. I mean, there are natural streams, there are leeches and everything, so you have to wear some sort of protective clothes and so on. And it's a hard work. I mean, the amount of the hard physical labor would go more into the plantation, because these women, maybe they're sitting in a bit more comfortable space grading capsules, but that doesn't kind of underplay the amount of labor that is being put into the system, I assume.
My major other two more questions are there, like, so is any, like, woman try to participate in the action in the cardamom action?
No, there are no.
So
I
far.
mean, that's yes, because even though some of the cardamom, exporters, they have firms in the name of their daughters or their wives, but it's all controlled by men. And sometimes one or two women were there as a representatives from either Spices Board of India or the auction companies, but they have nothing to do with the auctioning. I mean, the auctioning was, as you saw in the picture, it is only men. And there were days when I was doing field work, I was the only woman there. And my interlocutors often took it some time to sort of, get into terms with the fact that, okay, there is a woman who is also present in the auction floor. Because it's as I said, it's a male's domain. It's also a domain where there's a vigorous show of masculinity, because the successful one is seen as the one who is like, having a certain control over the setting. It's an ascending auction, so one has to calculate the risk and uncertainties of cardamom trade, because cardamom is also a spice which lacks the international price standardization. So I would say there are so many performances in that floor which goes in order of a show of a masculine image, and that well combines with the image of the dominant caste also.
Yeah, the final question is like, see, if the major work is done by the laborers on the top of the hill, like, if if they get bitten by the snake or something, so for their health insurance, is there any kind of health insurance for them, or like, how that health system is going to be supported for those families?
Well, there are two kinds of laborers on a plantation. One are the permanent laborers, who are very few, who are resident laborers, and who gets the certain benefits of the Plantation Labor Act, like sickness benefits, blankets, and so on. Whereas this other group of laborers are hired on a temporary basis. And actually, there are three groups of laborers. So number one is the permanent, and number two is a temporary, and number three is those group of laborers who commute between Kerala and Tamil Nadu on a daily basis in search of work in the plantation during the season, which runs from August to March. And for the resident laborers, yes, they get some sort of health treatment. So the plantation where I worked, they had a small health center where there was a nurse who was coming to, check them and so on. But majority of the laborers are not permanent laborers. They are temporary. They are hired on a temporary basis. And the health, that's another point. I mean, I'm really glad that you raised it. I mean, this is something that I'm exploring in my next project, how women deal with their, how obligation to endure toxicity are being constructed socially. Because often women endure this pain. I mean, they just take a paracetamol or something and they just take it. And one interesting facet that I am still exploring is how it is affecting the reproductive life of women there. Because some of this, I mean, I think I failed to mention in my presentation, even highly toxic pesticides like endosulfan is used. So my next project is on to assess the health concerns of women who are producing cardamom. Yes, I hope I will then have a better answer to that question.
Yeah, because without women, there is no world, right? So that's why women health is really important. That's why it is really, I lost my mother due to this kind of intoxication product. So that's what I want to ask that question.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand. I mean, this is something that Baba Sahib, actually, he cautioned us how Brahmanism and capitalism goes hand in hand together. Because these women workers, why they are enduring the pain is also because they are socially conditioned to do so, because they live day in and day out in a Brahminical patriarchal system. And this is where the problem is. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Great.
Thank you. Now let's go to next person, Sanjay.
Okay.
Please go ahead with your question. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Mahesh. Anu, very informative sessions we have today. We eat cardamom day to day, but we never realize that so much goes into that, and especially knowing about the plight of our people in this whole cardamom business is really very pathetic. So you mentioned that our laborers go through all these difficult times there, especially use of chemicals which impact their health and all that. So are they covered with, are there any unions who control these laborers, and whether those unions have any safeguard in place for these laborers? Do they anything, or they are also in tow with these capitalists and the Brahmins people who are controlling this industry?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sanjay, for that very interesting question. I mean, the reason why I wanted to share my work with you all is because we come across so many commodities on a daily basis in our lives, but we seldom know where these commodities are produced, who produces it, or what kind of social relations go into its production. Undoubtedly, as an economic anthropologist, I can say that majority of the commodities that are produced in India are products of Brahmanical patriarchy. And in case of my interlocutors, the thing about pesticides toxicity, I am not in a position at now to say the much details about it, because it's an ongoing project that I am working in collaboration with soil scientists and also oncologists and so on. So I am so sorry. At the moment, I am not in a position to say the exact answers of that, but we will soon be coming up with the results because our major field work is yet to begin. Other than that, labor unions, yes, as I said before to Narayana, the resident permanent laborers are part of the labor unions. But there are these two other classes of laborers. Number one is the permanent laborers, and these days many interstate migrant workers are also working in cardamom plantations, especially those coming from northern parts of India. So this is another question to deal with, to what extent they are or they would be integrated into labor unions, considering that they are working in a state like Kerala, which is still ruled by a communist party. Whereas there's also the third group of laborers are these women workers who commute daily between Tamil Nadu and Kerala to work on the plantation. So they are not a part of any labor unions. And this is also a major reason why there is no fixed wage rate. It always fluctuates. And to just make it clear that not every plantation is owned by Brahmins. I was using Brahmanism. It is mostly owned by dominant caste people in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Some are Syrian Christians from Kerala, as well as from Tamil Nadu. There are people who also belong to Nadar caste, which is seen as a dominant caste in many regions like Virudhunagar and elsewhere.
Thank you, Anu.
You're welcome.
Yeah, let's go to the next question by Dr. Poshan.
Thank you. Thank you for your talk and the work you did. Very fascinating. My question is around, did you notice any presence of regulatory framework, like a government? And part of that question is that's before independence and after independence. I repeat, in the presence of any government regulatory presence in preventing exploitation of these organs before independence and after independence. Thank you.
To just be sure, Poshan, you were asking me to explain regulatory frameworks as in labor laws or labor welfare measures, something like that?
Preventing exploitation of the Bahujans in this business or work.
So one thing was, of course, the Plantation Labor Act that came into enforce in the 1950s with its various amendments, which later came forth. But as I said, there is a great chunk of laborers who are more like footloose laborers who work on in plantations depending on different seasons. So they are completely out of this labor welfare schemes or labor welfare measures. I mean, my interlocutors, I personally do not, I mean, from my interactions with my interlocutors for past 6 years of fieldwork, I don't think they receive any, I mean, I'm talking again about the laborers who are being employed on a temporary basis. They don't receive any special benefits from the labor welfare measures. But of course, those who are permanent workers, they get some benefits, yes, like sick allowances and quarters, like in the labor quarters and so on. But others, for example, those people who commute daily from Bodinaikanu region to Kerala, covering about 200 kilometers a day, they don't receive any benefits, no.
Thank you.
And things have not majorly changed. I would say one thing which have changed is, of course, the wage rate has gone up, but one has to always calculate that, if somebody was receiving, for example, rupees 70 for a day's work in the 1970s, and now it's 350. I mean, when we take into account the inflation and other things, I don't think one can say that, okay, it's a welfare thing, that there was a very considerable rise in the wage rate. No, I can't see it in that perspective. But of course, wage rate has increased, but then the living expenses has also gone up in that sense. So I don't tie it up to say that it was a regulatory measure.
Hello.
Yeah.
No, hi, how are you?
Hi, Salim Uncle. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Some 2 questions only.
Yeah, sure.
Someone might have asked also. I just gone in the kitchen, so I think. Anyway, I'm still asking you if it is already answered. Is okay. The first one is there any union? Because it is CPM government, no? So there must be C2. So are C2 organizing these people in some way or the other? Because Kerala is supposed to be the best to labor policy in the country, and they pay workers very well. So how this implies in this case on this laborer? Are they unionized? Are they getting unionized? Should I ask both the question
Yeah,
together?
sure.
And the second question is, was there any rebel spontaneous in the past? Spontaneous, rebel against this sort of exploitation in the past? Because this is applies almost like a slavery, and slavery always had spontaneous rebels and all. So in this case, was there any spontaneous rebel in the past? Because whatever condition which has improved now, it is, I mean, before it must have been very worse, as you said, it has been there for generations or maybe so many or more than a century. So
yeah. Well, thank you, Salim Uncle, for that very interesting questions. Yeah, I think I did mention to the previous Dr. Poshan this answer. They are the permanent workers. They are the members of CITU or INTUC, fractions of both Communist Party as well as International Congress. But then, I would say that the permanent worker to temporary worker is of the ratio maybe of 1:3. So majority of them are temporary workers, and then they are not a part of unions. But then, of course, the resident laborers are a part of the unions. And one reason is that why the temporary workers are not a part of the union is because often they work in different plantations depending on the season. And one major example for this is the indigenous communities, the Panias. The Paliyas, actually, not Panias. Paliyas who live in the Cardamom Hills. They come for work during the season, and they are not a part of any labor unions because they are mostly, like, as I said, hired on the seasonal basis. And your second question on the rebels, yes, there has been moments where people protested, and I think in those times INTUC also played its role, especially there were labor union mobilization under the Communist Party of India, CPI. This was in the earlier times, but this was again mostly in the tea plantation belt. Cardamom plantations has a different dynamics altogether to itself. Though the labor unions are functional and there are people who are in the unions, but the thing is like the way in which labor recruitment happens to cardamom plantations and that to the tea plantations are completely different. I mean, this is one geographical place where you have these two systems, like tea plantations and cardamom plantations. I mean, in that sense, cardamom plantations work more like a social system, if I might take it from Sharit Baumik. So it's a special system of and especially the estate that I worked has been a special, like a particular system where people are living there for years, and that is also because I mean, you see, it's as I said, it's a special social system because these people speak Tamil, the owner is a Tamil, workers are Tamil, and they are in a state of Kerala where once they go out of the gates of the estate, it's a Malayalam speaking population. So some sort of the geographical as well as the physical nature of the plantation, which extends into many hectares, also sort of creates an isolated situation. So yes, the places where the estates where I have done my field work, I haven't heard of any sort of rebellion against it. But of course, the labor charges has increased. And laborers are a part of CITU as well as INTUC. And then, of course, some are also a part of the labor unions of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Yeah, but the temporary workers are completely out of this purview. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Anu Mandavilli.
Thank you so much for this presentation, Dr. Krishnan. I learned so much, and I'm just eager to read more of your work after this. I had a question and a comment. The question was, during your field work and in your research about the plantations and the women who work in them, did you learn about any, political interventions that are happening that address the, the situation that you described, right? The labor exploitation of the women and so on. Are there any newer models of organizing that's going on in the plantations, or changes in ownership patterns or anything like that, which we can perhaps look to see, as sort of sources of change in the situation? Basically, I'm trying to understand what can lead us out of this, or what might be happening on the ground in reaction to the exploitation. And I also had a comment about sort of a similar situation that I heard about tea plantation workers in Kerala itself. In 2015, there was a spontaneous strike by a group of women that worked in, tea plantations. And of course, tea plantation workers are highly unionized, but they're very corrupt. And they're also affiliated, as you touched upon in the previous answer, they're also affiliated with specific parties, political parties. Therefore, they're not really independent, and they don't really respond to the concerns of the workers themselves. So this group called Pembile Vurmai, they had a spontaneous strike against and separated from the unions that are already operational in the plantations. And one of the last thing I wanted to note was that in addition to casteism, as you remarked, many of them are from Tamil Nadu, the workers who come and work in Kerala on either permanent or a temporary basis. So they, at least in the tea plantation workers, they also have to face sort of ethnic stereotyping, prejudice against workers from Tamil Nadu in general, in addition to sort of, sexism and casteism. They also have to deal with sort of, I don't know what I would call it, but I guess ethnic prejudice against Tamils in general who work in Kerala. So this comment about tea plantation workers is really more of a comment, not really a question. But I was wondering, is there any kind of interaction between these two bodies of workers, female workers, who probably hear about each other in terms of being unionized or not, or the levels of pay, because tea plantation workers get paid twice as much, I think. At least this data is about 7 years old, but at that time, they used to be paid between 250 and 500 rupees per worker, which is obviously higher than the rates that you just mentioned for cardamom plantation workers. So are there people maybe going from working on cardamom plantations to tea plantations, assuming it's a better, situation for themselves? Thank you again for your work.
Thank you very much, Anu. I mean, it's like, it's my name is also Anu, so it's okay, it's strange to call somebody back Anu. But thank you very much for the interesting questions. I will pick it up from the second comment on Pembalai Orumai, the rebellion. Actually, when I was answering Salimangal's question, I was thinking about the same. But I don't think any sort of a rebellion of that scale has happened in the Cardamom Hills, precisely because of the fact that the organization amongst the workforce is not that very visible, as you rightly said in the case of tea plantations. Prejudices against Tamil workers. I don't know if it's a prejudices. Who perpetuate this prejudices? The Malayalis or the people in the plantations? Because here the estates that I worked were owned by Tamils, and their estate staff was also Tamils. And even these women workers who were commuting daily, they were recruited by contract workers, like jeep drivers. The jeep driver would, jeep is sort of like a truck, and I think it's commonly known in India. So this person goes to the villages and recruits. I would say today's jeep driver was in the 1800s, like Kangani. Like you go and ask for female people who in the villages near Borinaikin or in the Kambam Valley, whether they wanted to work on the plantation. So they would come there was no that kind of a stereotyping about cardamom plantation workers, but amongst the Malayalis, I think it's not a job that many Malayalis of the region would prefer because of its very laborious and strenuous nature. Plus, stereotypes about Tamils among the Malayali people of the place exist, of course. But within the context where I worked, I couldn't see that very manifested, because I was basically working in a place that was, 99% of the people were Tamils. So there was no specific stereotyping about that. But of course, this is not a work that even these women workers want their children to take up. They want their children to study, and some of my interlocutors, in fact, are paying about 40% of their salary for their children's education, who are getting educated in Madras or in Madurai. So they wanted to get out. So there is some sort of a prevalent notion that this is a sort of a cycle that they want to come out. This connects to your first question about changes in the situation. People are trying, these kids of my interlocutors, they are getting educated elsewhere and they're trying to get out of the system. But then again, there is, still continuance of that if you check as in whole, like how the system works. And changes in the ownership patterns. Yes, the estates where I worked on, they are getting into more and more smaller holdings because of course, the planter might have two sons, and then, when the inheritance is being divided, obviously the holding becomes two. This has happened. Cardamom these days are also grown on smaller holdings also. So the bigger estates are only very few in the Cardamom Hills, but the worker situation more or less remains the same. Maybe in the coming generations, there would be a change because, as I said, many of my interlocutors send their children away for getting educated and to come out of this system and to gain some sort of an asset holding. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much. If I may, I have just one quick follow-up thing which I forgot to mention earlier. I live in the Bay Area in California, and there is, for example, one company that's started here, which is called the Diaspora Company. It's a small company, the startup, by an Indian American woman. And her whole sort of business model, which is extensively discussed on the website and otherwise, also is that they are a ethical sourcing company, right? So, apparently everything they get, not just cardamom, but all kinds of spices, turmeric and everything else, right? She claims to be directly in touch with the growers, the farmers, and then, making sure that they treat their workers ethically and, practice organic farming, all the sort of the progressive list that you can talk about, right? So I think that company is probably too small to have an impact on sort of in the global scale. But in general, what do you think about the impact of buyers or companies from abroad that can put a pressure on the company about adherence to particular standards? For example, in the case of coffee, I'm sure there's a whole fair trade movement and so on and so forth, right? Which insist on particular wage levels and environmental standards in the companies. Also for some certain kinds of fruit, also this is practiced in Latin America, for example. So is that a viable model, or is just a PR promotion that I'm taking way too seriously?
Thank you very much for that question. I mean, yes, I think I did miss to change. For your first question on changes in the situation, there is precisely because the Indian cardamom was getting rejected by countries like Sweden, Japan, US, and many other countries that followed the list. The Spices Board is increasingly, encouraging farmers for organic production. So there are 1 or 2 farms where it is organic, cardamom is organically produced. And about fair trade, I could cite you 1 or 2 or many anthropological works, especially on coffee and tea, which kind of brings fair trade into a position of questioning, because they say this is a new neoliberal technique. For example, the recent work of on coffee. In fact, it was Edward Fisher's work on coffee. It was published by the University of California Press. That's one thing which problematizes the fair trade. Another one is of coffee, and then another one is the fair trade of tea. Sarah Besky writes about the Darjeeling tea. So these works actually sees fair trade as a neoliberal agenda of marketing things differently, bringing into the table different products. But essentially, they argue that things are not very rigorously changing, because it is not. The benefits that fair trade argue to give it back to the farmers or give it back to the environment, it's not reaching as they sort of preach. So some of the works are there which questions fair trade. So cardamom, one option for cardamom getting a fair trade, or more like what can we do to change the situation? I would go back again to Baba Saheb, who said that it should be something like, he emphasized the need for cooperative farming and, community-based farming and so on. So this could be an ideal situation where you break down. Because a plantation, since its inception, it's an apparatus that breeds hierarchy. So unless you, sort of disintegrate that system of monocropping, no good will come out of it, neither for the environment nor for the workers. Because even though one would say that cardamom farmer, you're referring to a planter who has hectares under his control, or you're referring to a dominant caste man who is having 25 to 30 or even 100 acres. So I don't know to what extent then this person would give it back to the workers, because most of the workers are again, lower caste women. So to break the hierarchy, I don't think fair trade is something, sort of reflecting also it in the light of works that I mentioned of Edward Fisher or Sarah Besky or Paige West and even Sophie Chow, who writes about it. So I don't think that's an ideal situation unless we sort of disintegrate plantations as a system of industrial production, because you see many commodities that are capitalistic are also non-capitalistic, because they are, if if cardamom minus Brahminical patriarchy, I don't know how to produce cardamom then, because this is a whole fuel that goes into the machinery of industrial production of cardamom. So, for example, like again, Anat Singh, who is a very famous anthropologist, writes about how capitalistic commodities are at the same time non-capitalistic, and how it utilizes social relations, to make the machinery run. So when I think in the light of all these works and reflecting on what I also saw from my field work, I think the only effective way to see fair trade or organic production of cardamom would be to disintegrate the whole plantation culture itself. Because cardamom is also something which is being marketed as something which is produced from the lap of nature or garden fresh. I mean, all these brands that I showed you in my PowerPoint, they have taglines which says that garden fresh, which is never garden fresh. I mean, this is a sort of a commodity image making, marketing technique where you sell things. Spices have this legacy. Spices were always sold as some sort of an exotic commodities to be saleable in Europe and elsewhere particularly. I mean, earlier writings about pepper, for example, it's mentioned as pepper in the hills is guarded by cobras. Now, this is a popular fantasy, but this popular fantasy is being sold. And that's what happens with cardamom too, because cardamom, if you go to a cardamom plantation, the way pesticides are used there, the way women are exploited there, the super exploitation of women which happens on each cardamom plantation, I don't think anything is like, it can even stand anywhere near to the sort of adjective that, it's coming from the lap of nature. No, it is actually killing the nature. It's killing the biodiversity. It has already sort of, eradicated or thrown to extinction many flora and fauna in the Cardamom Hills.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go to Roy, Brother Roy.
Mahesh, thank you. Sorry, I know a lot of questions are already asked. And first, I would like to thank you, the Boston Study Group, and our super moderator, Mahesh Ambedkar. This is a divergent, this is a kind of entirely different topic. We most of our sessions are about, the history, ideology, but this is different. So much to learn. Each time we learn something new. There is so much pain we also learning about. So thank you. And I see that you're an excellent presenter and leader. Keep doing it. But how the global diaspora, the NRIs here, Ambedkarites, how we can help your work, your teams in India? That's the comment offer.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I mean, the one thing is that we have to be aware about how caste operates in the age of neoliberalism and the age of capitalism. Because as I said, unless, I don't know, like Mahesh just told me in the beginning that he's having a cardamom tea. So this is how, as I said, caste operates behind almost all commodities that is produced from India or produced in India. And so it's getting circulated in the global food systems. Now, as Ambedkarites, I think we have to be aware about the stories of these commodities, who produces these commodities, where it is produced, and what kind of social relations go into its production, which is obviously a Brahminical patriarchal system, which exploits the Bahujan woman. And to help, I don't know, I'm sitting down finally to write my book. This is a way as an anthropologist I can contribute. I must say I'm also an engaged anthropologist. I am constantly in touch with my, that's why, so this also has been at times a risky job for myself, because I come from the Cardamom Hills. Being a Bahujan woman who is coming from the Cardamom Hills, this is also risky for me. And that's why I wanted to, I'm very much looking very enthusiastically to my next project, which is on pesticide toxicity, because I think this is, in some sense, a biopolitics that controls, or that is, that makes the bodies of this women endure this pain. I mean, I am remembered of Tenmori Sundararajan, her new book, where she says caste is a suffering. And this is a suffering that is being perpetuated onto these women, their bodies, because in the US or in the Europe, there are stipulations against pesticides. But in India, it is unchecked. It goes unchecked even in the so-called very progressive state of Kerala. I mean, the victims of endosulfan issue in Kasaragod are yet to get their justice in Kerala. So this is a system that we are talking about. And when we talk about the rights over their bodies to Bahujan women, we have to be going and thinking an extra mile here. Honestly, Ray, I don't know how to answer your question, how you can help me, but rather...
No, but Anu, actually, Anu, let me comment. We had a roundtable last night with, very accomplished professors from India, Harvard, MITs, and Dr. Venkat Maharaj, Sanjay Bhagat was there. Your first part of answer was exactly what we discussed about. Educate, bring awareness, tell our stories, and no fear. And Seattle, that ordinance is an example of our unity. And we all have to, like myself, yourself, Mahesh, Sanjay, we all have to tell ourselves, I'm not alone.
Yes.
So first thing we want to convey to you, of course, we'll work with you offline, how we can, legally, but for upfront, we'll tell you, we are with you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And Rai, I think since we got this very, skeptical comment that this conversation is being watched, it itself is saying that there's a truth to what I talk, and the injustice that has been done both to the ecology of Cardamom Hills and to the women of Cardamom Hills because of this one product.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mahesh. I'm done.
Yeah, thank you. Priya, do you want to ask your questions?
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Sorry if I missed it, but I was just trying to know what percentage of Dalit population are being exploited in this work in Kerala, and because it is affecting the women reproductive system, is there any effect on the population, the death to birth ratio of the population in years?
Priya, as I must tell you that this is a data that I am in no discretion to say at this moment, because we are working on that. I must say there are serious health issues to women at this point. That's the only thing I can tell you, because this is a project which is going to have a field work, and which is being helped by some of the very, eminent professors who investigate pesticide assemblages in different parts of the world. So I am not, unfortunately, at the discretion to say the data right now. And this is also a public platform that also jeopardizes my fieldwork. So I am so sorry. I will have to refrain from that question, answering that question.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I totally understand.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anu, as Priya said, I'm also interested. What percent of Dalit populations are being exploited in this, like approximate?
I would say about 80% of the women who work there are Dalit women. And in some plantation areas, they are even settled in Harijan colonies or Lakshamveed colonies, like colony schemes which were implemented by the state of Kerala. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And before we go to Salim, Anu, she wants to know that quote that you opened with. Could you please ask the speaker to share the citation for the 1938 Ambedkar quote about Brahminism and capitalism?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was the address that Baba Saheb gave on the 13th of February in 1938 at the gathering of the depressed classes, railway workers at Manmat, where he said, there are two main enemies for all the workers in this country, Brahmanism and capitalism. And there he goes on to explain what he meant by Brahmanism and, why Brahmanism has been denying social rights and justice for workers in this country who are being, exploited by this twofold system.
Yeah, Anu Mandavelli, I will share Anu Krishna's email. You can contact her offline. So let's go
I mean, even the Priya Bansode can contact me if she's further interested. But unfortunately,
Sure.
public platform, I cannot say the results of my ongoing study.
Sure. Yeah. Let's go to Salim. I think he has got another question.
Yeah, Anu, see, if it is relevant to this thing, you answer. Otherwise, we can skip it. I just wanted to know, see, the amount means the amount of business is quite huge.
Absolutely.
So that means the business is very huge, but it is exported also. So can you, is it possible for you to say that see from the time it is produced and the time it comes to the market, of course the price is very difficult because it goes to many countries, but
Yes.
a little bit of a percentage of profit, how much they make overall. And second thing, and is there any, how we have some industrial houses, like we have Everest Masala is owned by someone, or some masala is owned by someone. So is there any kya bolte monopolize, not the known, I am not talking about Adani, Ambani, Tata Birla, but some known kya bolte name who are involved into kya bolte marketing, all this.
Yeah, very interesting question, Uncle. Like in just one last year, I mean, as I said, the exact amount of area under the acreage of cardamom in the Cardamom Hills remains an open question, which even the Communist Party doesn't want to address. But the Spices Board data for the last year, 2021-2022, says that about 40,000 hectares of land in Kerala are under the cultivation of cardamom, and the productivity is about 20,000 hectares. And the market, of course, India has a huge domestic market for Indian small cardamom, and next comes the Middle Eastern countries, and then Europe and North America. So all the top grade obviously gets exported. So the year that I was doing my field work in 2018-2019 in the port of Cochin, 183 consignments of cardamom were sent just from the port of Cochin. So it's an enormous amount of this commodity. I mean, because it goes to basically to Dubai, or Middle Eastern countries where Indian cardamom is an integral part of the Arabian coffee, which is called kava. Then it goes as a room freshener. So one of the advantage of cardamom, unlike pepper, for example, is because it's a multi-end use product. Cardamom goes into food, to air fresheners, to that of skin whiteners, and also medicine, and even it is being sold as an aphrodisiac. So this is like a spice which has a wide spectrum of usage. So it has been, of course, exported in huge quantities, but this recent reports on pesticidal residue has affected the Indian market a little bit. But what is the advantage for the Indian exporting houses is their huge domestic market. And the sales always go up and down depending on if it's a Diwali or a Ramadan season, because that's when always the sales are at high. And biggest exporting houses, often they have different names, and the one of the way I could track down some of the exporters is using their brand names. And what is very tactical is that I will tell you one anecdote from my field work. So there is this one export brand which has obviously a very Persian name. And when I called the exporter, there was a Quranic verse which was the caller tune. And then I goes to his exporting house in Tamil Nadu. He is a dominant caste Nadar person, and I couldn't see any Arabic or Persian symbolism of any kind in his house. It looked like a mini temple. But, everything that was relating to him was depicted otherwise Persian or Arabic, because his exporting house is the #1 exporting house in India, and it has like one top brand that also holds a Persian or an Arabic name. So it is actually very difficult to find out who are the big players. But then, of course, there are Gujarati merchants who own some of the big firms, who are again based in Bombay, for example, but they have trade links throughout the world, even in Hamburg, which is close to where I am at the moment, through which they control this huge market. And why did I say it's kind of a near oligopoly? When as you go up in the ladder of the cardamom chain, it's mostly like a near oligopoly. Only very few people are there who are again known to each other through social connections. This is because I was talking to a person who wanted to enter into cardamom business, because if it is, of course, a very lucrative business, like there's no international price standardization, so you can make a lot of money. I mean, you can make a lot of money as well as you can also lose a lot of money, because it's it's a very fluctuating price for cardamom. So this person told me it is near impossible to climb up the ladder in cardamom chain. Why? Because the others will make sure that you will be kicked out. And there are so many strategies played by the others, such as increasing the price in the auctions, to that of cutting you away from the potential markets and so on. So there are so many things that is going in this commodity chain. That's why in the very beginning, I called it a very dynamic system. But of course, it operates within, Brahmanism and capitalism. You can actually see the praxis of both of this exploitative system.
Thank you.
Sure. You can reach out to her. You can reach out to Boston Study Group. We'll be happy to connect you with Anu if you want to have more conversation on this topic. So before I thank you so much. Thanks to all the participants. Before I close this talk, I have a question to Anu. Anu, I love tea and I need to put cardamom. What should I do now? Because there is all these pesticides and etc. Right? Give me a solution.
Well, my solution would be in line with what Baba Sahib Ambedkar said about the land rights. Maybe we all should work hard and earn enough money. So we buy a collective farm and we make sure, just in line with Anu Mandavali said, at least there is some place where cardamom is produced organically, adhering to the real values of fair trade without exploiting the nature and the women. Because otherwise, as I said in my presentation, every single cardamom capsule is a metaphor of exploiting the ecology and the women in the place. Women who are the workers. So to break it is only to break the plantation system, the industrial production, the capitalistic production of cardamom.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So to conclude, I would like to thank Dr. Anu Krishna, Anu Krishna PhD for, actually this is, as Brother Roy said, it's a very unique and different kind of topic. Often we focus a lot on social issues and ideological issues and other issues of the Ambedkarite movement. But this is the first time, at least in my own, as I know, this is the first time that we have someone who gave us more insights into this the way the chain of production, distribution, exploitation happen in the commodity. And this is, I'm sure this is just one prime example. There are many for example, in brick industry, what happens in brick links that we witness back in the rural parts of India. So all these labor chains and exploitation, and there are no social protection, there is no minimum hours, there is no minimum wage. So there is a lot that's happening in this field, and thank you so much, Anu, for your time, interest, efforts, and your commitment, to bring out truth. So with this, I would like to thank Boston Study Group as well for giving me this opportunity and giving Anu an opportunity. And please reach out to, please follow Boston Study Group on Twitter, Facebook, and please write to us and for future collaboration, conversation, whatever. So thank you so much. I request, Anu, do you have any final words?
First of all, Mahesh and the others of Boston Study Group, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present my work. And thank you everyone for the very interesting comments and questions. Yes, and as I said before, I mean, for me, it's also a personal journey of getting to know more about Baba Saheb's works and how whatever he said years ago or decades ago, sort of resonates even today around us. And this is my way of understanding the world, because to getting to know more in very detailed and in very intimate way about how things that Baba Saheb cautioned us years ago is still happening, and it would happen unless we make small changes. And I hope all of us can make small changes in our daily lives.
Thank you, Anu. I request our team to close the meeting.
Hey, Mahesh, just
Yeah.
as a closing thoughts, we are having this magazine Awakened. We published 2 times a year. So our spring volume will be coming on 14th April. So we are looking for the articles, poems, as well as arts from the kids or even the elders. So if anyone is interested, please contact us at bostonstudygroup.org. The last date for submission is 15th March 2023.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. I request our team